If you're under 25, you're the majority, and you can run the country.
The President of the United States.
President before he's 25. Following a campaign that broke every rule in the book, people went wild. Wild in the streets. Starring Shelley Winters.
I've been under the care of an LSD therapist.
Christopher Jones. Diane Varsi. Holbrook. Richard Pryor. And guest star Ed Begley.
You raised up this monster at your rally. Your idea, Belli. Now, you two make your shaggy little monster behave and then get rid of him.
He lived like a young monarch. And listen to the voice of the young.
We're gonna make 30 a mandatory retirement age. We're gonna psych them all out on LSD, babies.
We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
I brought her back. She'll live and I'll get her another body.
They're gonna kiss me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, Doctor, help me!
Biologically speaking, it's of primary importance that man should want to mate. Hey, that
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
You think you're gonna make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first!
The American International Podcast.
Are you ready?
Hello and welcome to this Wild in the Streets episode of the American International Podcast. I'm Jeff Markin.
And I'm Cheryl Lightfoot. Today we're going to talk about, as already indicated, Wild in the Streets. It's a 1968 film from American International Pictures, obviously.
It was directed by Barry Shear, who is mostly known for his TV work.
And it was written by Robert Thom, who also wrote Death Race 2000, which is a great movie. This movie was based on his short story, The Day It All Happened, Baby.
The film stars Shelley Winters as Daphne Flatow, Christopher Jones as Max Jacob Flatow Jr., also known as Max Frost.
And we have Diane Varsi as Sally LeRoy, Holbrook as Johnny Fergus, and his wife is played by Millie Perkins.
Also appearances by Richard Pryor as Stanley X, Bert Freed as Max Jacob Flatow Sr., Kevin Coughlin as Billy Cage, and Larry Bishop as The Hook.
Larry Bishop is Joy Bishop's son. Fun fact.
I did not know that.
I do. Also notable in the cast is Ed Begley, and that would be Ed Begley Sr., as Senator Allbright.
The film features songs by Barry Mann and Cynthia Weil. They are a husband and wife songwriting team. They've been married since 1961, and they're responsible for not only the songs in this film, but songs like You've Lost That Love and Feeling, We Gotta Get Out of This Place, Make Your Own Kind of Music, and Somewhere Out There, among many others.
And the music in this film is actually really important to the plot, so we'll get into that as we discuss the movie.
Our film opens up with fireworks.
Yeah, but not the good kind. Basically, we get a narration by Shelley Winters, who, when she's on screen, she basically uses up all the oxygen in this movie. But she's talking to her husband, saying basically she doesn't want to have sex, because if she has sex, she might get pregnant. And if she gets pregnant, she'll probably have a baby boy, and she definitely doesn't want that. And obviously, that's what happens.
The big announcement comes on screen. It's a boy.
Yep.
And then we see this crying baby boy.
Max Jr.
Max Jr., while Daphne continues to complain about this off screen.
She doesn't stop complaining on screen or off, ever. She's basically sexually regressive, repressive. She catches young Max kissing a little girl, and she calls him dirty, 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 and she's going to scrub him clean.
Scrub till you're clean, clean, clean.
Exactly. And, she basically terrorizes him for his entire life.
When we see him a little bit older, he looks a lot like a young Greg Brady.
That's because he is a young Barry Williams.
And in his one scene, he is talking to Max Sr. about how embarrassing it is to his friends that he has plastic over his furniture.
She slip covers everything. And they decide to get rebellious, and they basically tear it off and let the dog jump on there. And Mom comes home and smacks the living crap out of the both of them. And when we next meet Max, he's now a teenager.
He's a chemist of some sort, isn't he?
Yeah, he's like a drug chemist, Jeff. He makes LSD and weapons, actually. He's got a dual interest line there.
And he's managed to stash away $800, which is enough to leave home.
Not in today's money. So this is before the 66 election. And then he has to become famous. So this is like 1964 money.
Wow.
Okay.
He's rich.
Well, yeah. And at any rate, it's in 1960s money. So take that under consideration.
And this leads to kind of a montage where he has another rebellious streak and he finally slashes the plastic off the furniture.
He doesn't just slash the plastic. He slashes the furniture. Like he basically takes a knife to the whole
Yeah, he trashes the whole house.
And then
he blows up his dad's Chrysler.
Yeah, he's got to basically get both his parents, where they what they love the most, mom's furniture and dad's Chrysler.
So after all that, we finally have opening credits.
Yeah, that's a lot. But that's just his backstory, which tells you why he is the way he is. But when the opening credits come, we find out that he's now a rock star. Not just your garden, run-of-the-mill, plays a few gigs here and there. He's a superstar.
So as we see the American International release and James H. Nicholson and Samuel Z. Arkoff present Wild in the Streets, we are treated to the song Free Lovin', performed by Max Frost.
It's a pretty good song. Actually, I do like the music in this.
Yeah, it's kind of an old blue-eyed soul kind of feeling, something like Steve Winwood would have done back in the day.
Yeah, not like the 80s, but in the 60s. So this is not obviously Christopher Jones singing. He's dubbed in. His singing was dubbed in by a singer called Harley Hatcher. Once we get out of the credits, we find out that Max Frost lives in a Beverly Hills mansion.
We find this out through Paul Frees' narration, which goes throughout the entire film.
Yeah, this is that's kind of like a weird device that they use, that they have a narrator for a good deal of the movie. Because it's like a pseudo-documentary style, but it's not really presented that way.
We learn that his sources of revenue include personal appearances and record deals.
And he has his own publishing business, so he's smart. He's, keeping the rights to his own music.
And we meet his entourage who lives with him.
Yep, true hippie style or commune style. I think it's really hilarious how they introduce them. He lives with former child star Sally LeRoy, who's 24, and she's a vegetarian mystic acid head.
Abraham Saltine, the Hook.
He's 20, and Max Trumpeter.
Billy Cage, a 15-year-old Yale graduate.
The youngest in the Yale Law School history.
He's also Max's business manager and the guitarist.
And he has an IQ of 186. And then this is my favorite. Stanley X. This is Richard Pryor. I just love him in this movie. Stanley X, 21, drummer, anthropologist, author of the Aborigine Cookbook. Everyone's got like a multiple interest.
And Fuji Elly, a Japanese typewriter heiress and beach bum.
And she's 14.
So she's 14?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, she's the youngest of the entourage. The ages are important. This actually matters. Because in the next scene, he's at a concert and he's addressing his fans.
He's on television.
Yeah, it's a TV concert. Well, I mean, he's like, I can't even like tell you who he would be analogous to. He's just a superstar in the 60s, whatever time period this is, the mid 60s. He's like the Rolling Stones, like the Beatles. He has that kind of a sway over the audience. But he's not a band. He's an individual. So Max is addressing his audience and he's telling them that, he found out in the news that 52% of the people in the country are under 25. That's a majority. And that means that they can be in charge if they decided to do something with that. So I think that's the crux of the movie, is basically the age gap between the generations. And Max is on the under 25 side, and he wants to kind of like organize his followers and use that power.
And among the viewers on this television program is Daphne Flatow. She says, "I'm the mother of a famous man. I'm a celebrity."
Well, she didn't even realize it at first. She had to like get her husband, and she's like, "Is that our kid?" And then they're like, "Oh yeah, that's Max."
Then she immediately goes to get her hair done.
Yeah, well, they decide that they can have the money for total makeovers now. So she gets her teeth capped, and she gets a facial, and Max Sr. gets a toupee and hair dye. They decide they're going to go surprise him at one of his concerts.
And while all this is going on, there's a scene just kind of slipped in with Max and his entourage, and they're just talking about how much he loves kids.
Yeah, and he's got 4, but he knows 2 of them.
And that's another important point of the film as this progresses, is his love of kids.
Well, to a point.
Well, yeah, but I mean, it's
not that he loves children. It's just that he's an advocate for young people.
At this point, we are introduced to the character of Johnny Fergus.
Yep, he's running for senator. I think he's currently a congressman, but he's got senatorial ambitions.
We learn that he's 37 years old.
And he thinks he's young, but Max does not. But
Max thinks 30 is old.
Yeah. But Johnny is savvy enough to know that the youth vote is going to propel him to victory. So he wants to team up with Max.
Well, this is a period in time when no one under 21 had a vote.
Right, yeah, but they could be drafted and sent to Vietnam. And so that was a real political issue that this movie does address, in its way. I mean, it is kind of a comedy and, it's satirically presented, but that actually is, like a real hot button issue of the day. Why could you be drafted and sent to Vietnam to die for your country, but you had no vote in it? And that would not be addressed until the 26th Amendment was passed in July of 71. So until that point, everyone who went to, every 18, 19, 20-year-old who went to Vietnam had no vote. And, obviously that was not fair.
This is another movie where time is really hard to define. There's a lot of cutaways where you find stuff happening and you go back and find that no time has passed whatsoever. Or several years have passed.
Right.
It's really hard to follow if you're trying to look at it linearly.
So what I did is kind of like track back, like this must be one of those offsite, like mid-year elections. So like the 66 election, not presidential, but just the, Congress and Senator out for election.
So now we see another concert happening, and this time the band is playing a song called Listen to the Music. This one's kind of a bubblegum thing. Most of their music seems to be kind of a bubblegum kind of music.
Right, yeah, but there are like a couple of, I feel like protest songs or, like something a little more significant than that.
And we see Daphne in the audience, and she just looks mesmerized.
Yeah, she's entranced. Do you feel like there's a weird squeakiness between the two of them where there's a little more than a mother-son relationship in her mind, not his, obviously?
I think that actually comes up at some point.
Yeah, where it's really gross. Her character is gross. I'm sorry, but she got rave reviews from this, from like everybody who watched it, but other critics. But
it's obviously an afternoon concert because it lets out and it's still daylight.
She forces herself backstage. Like she forced her way into the theater saying, I'm his mother. And once the concert's over, she forces her way backstage, like tussling with security. And Max sees her and he's like, let her in.
And the rest of the band standing there looking very bemused by the
they know they have something to razz them about later. So they're escaping the arena. There's fans everywhere, a la Beatlemania. And they get into his Rolls Royce, and she insists on driving.
And she does not seem to be a good driver.
No, she's like all over the place. She's going into like do not enter zones and oncoming traffic. It's just crazy.
And Max is leaning from behind her, is behind her and trying to grab the wheel. And
there's too many people in this car. It's not that big.
Anyway, things don't go well, and there is probably a casualty.
Yeah, she runs through a yard, and there's a little boy sitting in the yard just minding his own business, and she mows him over, basically. She hits him, knocks his shoe off. He's laying on the ground. He may be dead, but he's still breathing. So
he's still breathing, his eyes open, but I think he's supposed to be dead.
Yeah, he's supposed to be playing dead.
He's just not a good actor, let's say with that.
And we don't know either way. We just know that Max tells his lawyer, his teenage lawyer, Billy, to kind of get her out of trouble.
Well, before that, let's talk about his reaction.
Oh, yeah, he's not happy.
Well, no, he's not. So Max runs out of the car to check on the boy and picks up his lifeless body.
Question mark?
And says, "What did you do?" Because Max cares about kids.
Yeah. Yes, he does. And But he's still, like, he wants to get his mother out of trouble, so he tells his teenage lawyer to kind of get her out of it. But he also tells his mom that he never wants to see her again. I think also his dad is injured in this accident because later we see him in a wheelchair. And he's not quite right. He never works again, I think, after this.
And then we cut to a political rally for the Fergus campaign, and we get the chance to meet his family. We're introduced to his wife and his daughter, little Mary.
She's cute.
And his 2 sons, Jimmy and Joseph.
Jimmy and Joseph are big fans. Actually, all 3 of them are big fans of Max's music. But Jimmy and Joseph are older. So I would say Jimmy is probably 16. Joseph is probably 14 or somewhere around there. And they're obviously in a political family, so they kind of live and breathe politics themselves.
And since Max was brought into this environment to try and sway the younger boat in Fergus's favor, he is up there to perform and to address the audience.
It doesn't go quite as Fergus might have wanted, though, because he talks to them not to rally them to, hooray, you can vote at 18. He starts thinking, well, why not younger than 18? Why not 14? And that kind of raises a few eyebrows amongst the Fergus and his staff and his family. He calls him old and says that, he calls him out for being old, basically, and says, just bringing the vote down to 18, that's sneaky Panther games. Why not? That's what he says. Why not make it younger?
And he breaks into the song 14 or Fight.
That's a fun song.
This one's kind of catchy.
Yeah, it is. And there's not much to it, but it's a rallying cry. Get the vote at 14 or fight.
And during the song, he talks about age and how he's never met a chick who admitted to being 35 unless she was 75.
Kind of true.
And the audience is digging it.
He says that no one gave women the vote. They had to fight for that right. They would kill or die for that right.
And the young people have got the numbers. They've got that 52%.
So they should do the same. So he organizes, he's on TV, so he just basically spontaneously organizes a protest or a riot, maybe, to happen that Saturday night on the Sunset Strip.
And he starts addressing everyone as troops.
Yeah, it's kind of a militaristic hold he has over people, where he's the commander in chief, and they're his troops. They're his army.
So they have this demonstration scheduled for Saturday night, and Senator Allbright is concerned.
Yeah, he's the Ed Begley Sr., and by senior, I mean senior. He is old, and he's aghast at this. Like, he can't believe that Fergus is, kind of aligning himself with this young rabble-rouser, and he wants him to call it off. He wants Fergus to make Max call it off. And this conversation is happening in Fergus's house, and suddenly they hear Max Frost's music coming from the other room. Yes. And it turns out the kids are in the other room listening to his music. And their mom comes in and turns it off, and they question, why can't they vote? Right, yeah. Max is really getting to them. Not just them, but like all teenagers, as we'll find out. So Fergus agrees to meet with Max and discuss this and try to call off the Saturday night demonstration because it could be dangerous. Well, he doesn't just want him to call it off. He wants them to calm them down, like modify his message. Instead of 14 or fight, why not 16 and ready? And then there's some negotiation there where Max kind of makes him go back to 15 because he wants his teenage lawyer to be able to vote too. So 15 and ready as opposed to 14 and fight. And so he agrees to tell his troops that and also to not be violent. And cue a topless Sally walking in with tiger's milk. Yeah, her breasts are covered by her hair, but it still like sets off Fergus's wife and Senator Allbright, and they're just like, what the hell? And so they go outside, and there's reporters out there, asking how the press conference or how the meeting went, and he's Allbright's all no comment, and he gets in his car. But Max is addressing the troops and tells them the new message is going to be 15 and ready. So we get to the narrator comes back here to tell us that the teens are assembling early. They came one night early. They're making surfboard bonfires. It's the biggest crowd's ever seen. The news the next day says that the crowds have paralyzed the city, calling it the biggest block party ever. And there have been casualties. 3 housewives died from watching it on the news.
And Jimmy, Fergus' son, wants to go to this rally, but that's not politically appropriate for a would-be senator to have his son demonstrating. So instead, he is sent to his room, and it's this really artsy shot of the stairwell as he walks past it and up.
Yeah, he gets smacked, too, before he goes up there. His brother Joseph comes to talk to his dad and asks him, he doesn't ask him, he points out that no one wants to be old, so why should kids want to grow up? Because, the Fergus, senior, the senator, is running on a campaign of, vote for me, I'm young. And so his son's wondering, well, why should we want to grow up if being young is so desirable? It's kind of a good scene. I kind of like that conversation that they have. And, with all the other silliness that goes on, that feels like a real genuine moment to me.
And all these events just make things happen because at 2 p.m., the governor agrees to endorse the Fergus bill and lower the voting age in the state. And then a police helicopter brings in Ferguson and Max to address the crowds at the demonstration.
Yeah, so he steps out of the helicopter. They hand him a microphone.
Helicopter.
Yes, a helicopter. They hand him a microphone, whoever's organizing this, and he says, be cool, kids, go home. We got this. And then they take off again, and that's basically it.
And then the Paul Frees narration lets us know that within a week, 3 more states have passed legislation to lower the voting age, and 18 more states have done so within a month.
Yeah, so this is a movement that is, things are happening. It's not just wishful thinking. They're being listened to.
So next we see young Jimmy Fergus breaking into Max's house, and he trips over the sleeping bodies a la Frankie Avalon in Beach Party.
Yeah, they sleep like commune style. Nobody has their own bedroom. Jimmy rats out his dad. He says that, basically that he's just courting Max for the votes and he's not really interested in his agenda. But he also tells him something interesting that they can use. A congressman has just died of cancer, and that seat is going to be open for election, but the person running has to be 25. Well, who's 25 in this world that we're in?
But Max isn't 25 yet.
He's 22, I guess.
But Sally LeRoy is.
Well, almost. Her 25th birthday is Tuesday, and she can run. Now, on election day, Johnny Fergus wins in a landslide.
And there will be a special election to replace the fallen congressman.
Right. Sally also wins by a landslide. She's elected. And then she goes to Washington.
And while all this is happening, we're treated to the song Sally LeRoy.
Yeah, which is kind of one of those songs that tells you exactly what's happening in the plot. So
it's a song of exposition.
Exactly. So she appears before Congress in like a leather bikini. She plays a tambourine. She is obviously wasted. So she's an acid head and she's tripping. But she has the wherewithal to introduce a bill lowering the age where you can run for representative, senator, and president. And each one she wants to lower to the age of 14.
This causes teenagers everywhere to start chanting, amend, amend, amend.
Yeah, they start rioting and there's protests. D.C. is besieged by protesters.
And as a result, there are police shootings and 12 people are killed.
Wow. This is kind of like, for a movie that's not a serious drama, there's seriously dramatic things happening here. Max finds out about this and he performs on television again and he's like got a tear rolling down his face. And this is the really good song from the movie is, that's when we hear it.
The Shape of Things to Come.
Right. So this is when he plays The Shape of Things to Come, which I think is the greatest song in this movie. So this is a classic protest song. And I think it's really well done. And I would listen to this regardless of what it means in the movie.
Well, it was used in a Target ad a few years ago, so it still has some staying power.
I wonder what they were advertising.
So Jimmy comes to visit his father. I guess he's been estranged from the family since the day he broke into Max's house.
He did let his hair grow long, though. So
his hair is longer, and he tells his father that he's now part of Max's brain trust.
Yeah, political advisor.
And that they feel that foreign policy is no longer necessary. Wars will be a thing of the past with a younger generation leading the way.
Yeah, I mean, why even have a foreign policy, basically? That's what causes all the trouble. He calls his dad, his dad says, I need a drink. And he's like, yeah, you're the alcoholic generation. So they're kind of like, razzing the older generation for, having to lean on alcohol while they themselves are on drugs all the time. So there's just a tiny bit of hypocrisy there.
So to prove his son right, Johnny comes home drunk.
And trashes his kids' rooms. He's ripping their posters off the wall. He tells this little girl that, no more Max Frost. You can only listen to Winnie the Pooh. And she's angry. This makes her upset. And she says, I hate you, through tears.
And next we see Congresswoman Sally lying in a fountain.
Yeah, things are a lot more chill at Max's place. She's listening to music. She drops her little transistor radio in the pool. It looks like dropping your phone in the pool, basically, for modern eyes.
And that's basically all happening in the background, but it's still very, very noticeable. But the main topic of conversation here is how can they guarantee a 2/3 vote
for this amendment that Sally proposed?
Right.
So they bring up blackmail, assassination is bandied about.
And they figured it out. Lace the water with LSD.
Duh. Why didn't I think of that? Max is going to tell his troops, go home, don't drink the water, don't make coffee with it. And then he assigns everyone else kind of a grid to spike the water of the people who would be voting on this amendment. And they just dump it in the fields and streams, like in the streams and ponds too. So they're just dumping vats of acid everywhere.
So everybody over a certain age is tripping.
Oh, it's funny too. They do these POV shots of everybody kind of waving back and forth and laughing and saying all kinds of goofy stuff. But yeah, that's what tripping is like, I guess. They have multicolored filters on the camera, and it's funny. But the only one who's not happy is Fergus, and he's angry. I mean, he's still tripping, but he's not having a good trip. He's having a really bad trip.
But the strategy works because Sally's bill is passed.
Yeah, so now any high schooler can run for president. Hooray!
And now we see Daphne, I think for the first time since the accident.
Yeah, well, she does mention that. Johnny Fergus has tracked her down. I think he wants to kind of get it in on Max.
And he's trying to convince her to help him stop his reign of terror.
Yeah, but she doesn't want to call it a reign of terror. She's pretty mellow now since
she's a hippie now, and she's seeing an LSD therapist.
They actually have those now, so they're a little ahead of their time.
And this is where we learn that Max Sr. is in a wheelchair.
Right. She compares himself to basically Mary trying to change Jesus's mind. That would never happen. So she's, really into this sort of Messiah mother thing.
So long story short, she refuses to help Fergus tear down Max.
So now Max is going to run for president, but which party is he going to run for? I mean, you'd think Democrat, just from a modern perspective, but no, he's going to be a Republican.
Well, the reason is because he wants to run independent, and if not Democrat, but the Republicans want him because they want to win the election, and they know that they will win if they have him as their candidate.
And he agrees to go along with that. He's going to be in the party of Lincoln and Herbert Hoover and represent them. I don't think he really cares either way. I don't think he adheres to any one philosophy other than his own kind of hedonistic.
He's doing what he has to do to get the job.
Yeah. Hedonistic ambition, I guess I would say. So Max has his own sort of Citizen Kane style rally and basically says that you want to vote for youth. You don't want to vote for age. What would a 60-year-old man have? Why should he have the power? Should you ask him? I'm not saying this very well. Why should 60-year-old men run the country? He says the only thing you should ask a 60-year-old man is, do you want to have your wheelchair facing the sun or facing away from the sun?
And all this information is presented to us through this crazy montage with multiple screens and we see Daphne's being interviewed. There's a lot of like press conferences, and Dick Clark is a reporter. And
I think there's one scene where we're supposed to believe that Nixon is watching because he's holding a dog that looks like Checkers. I don't know if you remember the Checkers scandal where he picked up his basset hound by the ears. We just see the silhouette of a guy watching TV playing with a basset hound, and I think that's supposed to be Nixon.
And Maximilian Frost has won in the biggest popularity vote in history. Every state except for Hawaii has voted for him.
Yeah, it's a landslide. Now, Max's first address to the country as the new president, there's no swearing in or anything. He's just president now.
Well, this is the State of the Union address, isn't it?
Yeah.
So this is probably a couple months later, we assume.
Yeah, some time has passed. So Max decrees that the fly in the ointment, the troubles in our country, are not the communists, not the Jews, not the labor leaders. They're not bankers, Russians, or even the Chinese, as he pronounces it. He says it's those who are stiff. Not stiff with love, but stiff with age, baby.
Yep, age is the enemy.
Because they have all the money, but they won't share it with us. And
during this speech, Fergus is in the room, and he has a gun.
What happens here is a really clumsy assassination attempt. It fails. It never had a chance of succeeding, and Fergus runs away.
Yeah, somebody saw him and said, he's got a gun, and he takes off.
Yeah. But don't worry, Max says we'll catch him later.
And then he makes his announcements that 30 is going to be made a new mandatory retirement age.
Yeah, and before you get too excited, for all of you approaching 30 or over, it's not going to be great.
And at 35, you'll be placed in a rehabilitation camp.
Yeah, a groovy retirement center with where you can get psyched out on LSD.
Permanently.
Yeah, whether you want to or not. So some people he thinks will go willingly because they want to give up the responsibilities of paying the bills and, whatever. But everyone else has to be rounded up, sort of.
He's talking about how positive this is going to be. And as the speech is going on, we're treated to the visuals of everybody being rounded up and forced into these camps. And
it's there's a lot of concentration camp kind of analogy. They're stripped of their clothes. They're made to wear these ugly blue caftans. They're all set in front of a cooler full of LSD punch. I don't know, it's like green or something.
Yeah, water coolers are set up, and as soon as you arrive off the bus, you're forced over to there and take a drink of LSD.
Right. Sorry, Hawaii. Everyone in Hawaii is going to be killed. They all get an injection, a lethal injection. Although there are a few survivors, but they're so whacked out they don't matter anymore. So Max is at a press conference. Max is being interviewed by none other than Bobby Sherman, sort of a teen idol from the 60s and 70s. And he asks him about an underground railroad movement, which Max is not too concerned about because he thinks that Canada and Mexico and Cuba are all being run by old men. So the youth there will basically do the same thing they did in America. And they'll have their revolution as well. Max isn't worried about the old people who might be hiding in the attics or trying to pass as younger, because they're probably not going to be a danger, or else he'll just, round them up later. Well, this is also where they indicate this is going on in other countries too. So like an underground railroad situation won't really matter because it's happening in Canada and Mexico and Cuba.
And this is all voiceover as we see Johnny Fergus and his family are discovered and captured.
Yeah, Max has a Gestapo, basically. They're all dressed in black with, like berets, and he has his secret police.
And we've seen several of the older characters we've already been introduced to are already in these camps. You see Senator Allbright greeting a bus.
He loves it there.
And he seems very, very happy.
Right.
He smiles and waves.
But you know who's not happy to be rounded up? Max's mom.
No, Daphne doesn't want to go because she's not old. She's young. Yeah. And she keeps telling everybody around her that she's young.
Actually, it slips out that she says, I'm young, I'm Aryan. So that's kind of like, ew.
But Max Sr. has already been rounded up, and he's there too, and he seems happy as well.
Yeah, well,
in his wheelchair.
I'm sure you're just not even to live around Shelley Winters 24/7 is a paradise. Okay, so we get sort of a montage here. Max is kind of frolicking in the the meadow while we hear Paul Frees tell us that the U.S. has abandoned its foreign policy, dissolved the military. They're sending free grain to other countries to feed the hungry. And it's basically a hedonistic paradise for the 30 and under set in America.
And we learn that 14er fight is now a huge movement in Russia and a similar youth movement in China, despite the banning of rock music. And we see Daphne is holed up at home.
And she gets caught too.
In another shootout, she has a gun, and she's trying to defend herself.
She's not very good at it, though.
But she's not a good shot, no. So they drag her off, but she keeps insisting that she's young.
And also that she's Aryan, which is another like a Nazi kind of reference.
And thanks to Paul Frees, we learned that armed forces will be disbanded and free grain is sent to all the starving nations.
This is all done over a montage of Max frolicking through a meadow. He's enjoying himself in his new hedonistic paradise.
And we see that Mrs. Fergus is now in a rehabilitation camp. And behind her in the distance, we see that Johnny Fergus has hung himself.
It's not always in the distance. They actually do a close-up on his face. And he's,
well, in a distance from her.
Yeah. And they zoom in on his face and, his like tongue's lolling out and it's gross.
And we learn that little Mary's going to be staying with Max because he loves children.
Yeah, well, he deposits her basically in the nursery with his other kids, and one of his, baby mamas is going to watch her. She doesn't want to stay, though. She asks how old Max is, and he says he's 20.
Well, she said she wants to be president.
Yeah, she wants to be president. She asks how old Max is, and he says, guess, and she says, 100. And he says, no, I'm 24, and she goes, that's old.
And this kind of sticks with him.
Yeah, we flash back to that numerous times.
And Daphne is attempting to escape her camp.
Yeah, climb the fence, but she kind of gets the stick from the security guards.
And, well, she's making so much noise that they can't help but notice. If she'd stop wailing for a few minutes, maybe she'd be able to be a little more stealthy.
She could never be stealthy. So she's like sails up the fence. She's hanging on the barbed wire. Her hands are bleeding, and they pull her down as she sings "My Country 'Tis of Thee."
And Max is driving around, enjoying what he has created.
Yeah, he's dissolved the FBI, the CIA. There's no more secret service.
We learned all this from Paul Frees on the radio.
Oh, yeah. Radio exposition helps us out again.
And the words keep echoing in his head that Mary said to him, that's old.
Yeah, that's old. Back to the meadow. He's going to do some more, frolicking around.
I don't know if it was frolicking. I think he took a little LSD himself.
Oh, yeah. So he's like tripping through a field. He comes
to a reprise of Shape of Things to Come.
Oh, right. Yeah, because that's important. He finds a dock, and hanging off this dock is a line. He pulls the line up, and at the end of the line is a crawdad. He tries to free it, but it pinches him. So he throws it down on the dock, and he stamps on it until it's apparently dead. We don't see that, thank God.
And then 3 boys run up and say, what did you do to our crawdad? He was our pet. His name was Williger.
And he's like, oh, man, I killed it, bro.
Yeah, so what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, he's kind of lording it over that he's big and they're not.
So as he walks away, we see a close-up of the older boy, and he says, we're going to put everybody over 10 out of business.
And that's the end.
And that's the end.
I think that's a great ending. I think that's up there for me with like the Graduate ending where, like be careful what you wish for, because once you get it, you're not going to want it. Wild in the Streets was shot in 15 days, which is pretty fast, but that's sort of what American International was known for, like quick shoots and low budgets.
And this film was also nominated for an Academy Award in editing. And I think the reason for that is because it's very visible editing. Usually editing is not something you notice,
right.
But there's so many weird cuts and freeze frames and
graphics. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely sets it apart. It didn't win, but it definitely is a noticeable thing in this film.
Right. There's all kinds of celebrity cameo. Dick Clark is in this movie. Army Archer, the famous attorney Melvin Belli, Walter Winchell. There's just a lot of actual famous newscasters and personalities in this movie. And yeah, we do see a young Greg Brady getting bitch slapped by Shelley Winters. According to filmmaker Kenneth Bowser, the part that Christopher Jones played was offered to folk singer Phil Oakes, But he declined because he thought the movie distorted the actual nature of the youth counterculture of the period. I have some interesting trivia on this. There's a scene where Max asks Billy, the 15-year-old lawyer, how old he thought he would live to. And, in character, he says 30, maybe 25. I don't know. I don't know if I want to live that long. Well, in reality, the actor was killed in an accident at age 30. So art imitating life? Maybe. And in another case of art imitating life, the first member of Generation Z who was voted to Congress was named Maxwell Frost. He's a Democrat from Florida, and he was elected in 2022.
Wow. Wouldn't that be life imitating art?
Okay, I'm sorry. And one thing that I find funny is that a lot of the actors are older than their characters, which is obviously something that happens in Hollywood all the time. Diane Varsi, who played Sally LeRoy, was over 30 when she played Sally. So she was already in the concentration camp range when she started the film. And Max himself was pushing 30 in real life. What are your thoughts on the movie?
Well, there's a lot dated in this movie, and the idea of people under the age of 21 not being able to vote obviously isn't the issue it was. I think this is a movie that people should still take a look at today, because I think it has a lot to say about what's going on in the political climate.
Yeah, there definitely is. Whereas today's divisiveness is more along the lines of, party philosophy. Obviously, what's crucial here is the generation gap between old and young. I mean, I would consider this movie, part political commentary and part social satire. But the political commentary part, I think, is really, it was relevant to its time, but I think it's still relevant today.
Yeah, you have to look at it more of a metaphorical way today, but I think it's still, it's relevant.
And I kind of love how it points out the hypocrisy of age, where they want to appear young without giving up any of the privileges that they have from being older, that they want to deny to the younger generation.
It does sound sort of familiar.
Yeah. But the young people are also kind of hypocritical as well, because they don't really want the responsibility of being old, but they want all the privileges that come with it. So, whereas most of us kind of find that balance, it's an all or nothing thing for them. And you see that in the end, where Max himself is now every bit as oppressive to the younger generation as the old people were to him. He's willing to dump poor little Mary, in with strangers, regardless of what she wants. And he doesn't care that he, killed that poor Williger. But he's going to find that, basically he's going to be on the receiving end of their revolution someday.
Yeah, that's what happens. If you get rid of everybody who's old, then the next lowest generation is going to be the old.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
Now you're old. Yeah, and now everyone can hate you. I mean, whoever's in charge is who we hate, right? It's not because you're young and you're one of us. There's always going to be someone against you. So I think this movie actually did a really good job of kind of presenting those, while being silly and fun and having great music. I think it did a great job with the social and political commentary.
Yeah, this isn't one of the typical titles that comes to mind if you're naming off a list of American International pictures.
Right. It's not your typical monster movie. You think of AIP, you think of Rubber Monsters, you think of Vincent Price, and this would be kind of far down the list.
We were excited to talk about this one
because of how fun it is. Because it's an enjoyable movie, and it's got that rebellious teen thing going on. It's got Shelley Winters. I mean, it's got good music. We saw it before we ever thought of doing a podcast about American International Pictures, and we really enjoyed it at the time, just, as it was, just for the movie that it was, without worrying about its history or, cultural impact or anything. And so when we were compiling our list of what to start with, I definitely wanted this, as one of the first few movies, because I enjoyed it so much. And speaking of enjoyment, how would you rate this movie on our AIP scale, where A is awesome, I is intermediate, and P is pathetic?
This one's kind of a hard one to give on a 3-tier scale.
I'm sorry, but that's all we have.
Because I would probably give it what comes between I and P?
A minus.
Like an M, but...
Meh.
But no, I probably have to go with awesome. There are times it's difficult to keep up with what's going on because there's so much happening at once, because you're given Paul Frees' narration and you're given visuals that don't necessarily match up, and then you got this whacked out editing presenting several things at once, and the timeline isn't always necessarily clear.
That's true.
So I don't know if it's an easy movie to watch and get everything, but I've seen this film several times now, and I think I've got it. So given that and the information that it presents, I'm going to go with the A for awesome.
I'll give it an A as well. I have read many reviews of this movie that give credit for Shelley Winters for being the best thing in the movie, and I find her character just utterly unbearable. I mean, she's supposed to be, so she's doing a great job as an actress. But for me, the Shelley Winters of it all is probably my least favorite thing about this movie. So yeah, maybe A minus. I know that's not our scale, but just a little less than an A. And you're right, the timeline is very confusing at times, and I did have to basically, take a slide rule and figure out everything that happened.
There's math involved in watching this movie.
Yes, but I think it made me think, and it made me kind of revisit the suffragette movement. They referenced that, and what people will do for the right to be represented. And I think that part of it's really important, but it's presented in a really fun style with great rock music. So for that, I do give them an A, and I recommend it sincerely and heartily to everyone. And I think that about wraps it up. So until our next episode, I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And I'm Jeff Markin.
And we'll meet you at the drive-in.
Follow the American International Podcast on Instagram, Twitter, and Letterboxd at AIP_pod, and on Facebook at facebook.com/American International Podcast.
The American International Podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Markin.
A man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
And Cheryl Lightfoot.
A girl hungry for too many things.
The American International Podcast is part of the Pop Culture Entertainment Network.